It's no surprise that there is a lot of bad retirement advice on the internet. In today's video, we're going to explore some of the internet's most common retirement rules of thumb that will destroy your retirement. I am a certified financial planner and the owner of an independent financial planning firm, and every year I spend hundreds of hours helping my clients navigate the puzzle of retirement planning to achieve happy, stress-free retirements. Retiring is consistently reported to be one of the most stressful events of a lifetime. And part of this is a result of the fact that there is so much retirement planning information at our fingertips. It can be difficult to determine which tools are actually appropriate to your unique situation. Well, today we're going to debunk 4 of the internet's most common retirement rules of thumb and provide you with a practical framework to guide your personal retirement planning efforts. The first retirement rule of thumb that you should do away with, the 4% rule. There are so many angles to hit with the 4% rule, but the one I'm going to focus on today in this video is the following. Many people will follow the 4% rule because it is the kind of gold standard of safe withdrawal rates. But in actuality, it has no connection to what you need to spend in retirement. According to the 4% rule, if you have a $1 million starting portfolio value, you would take 4% of that balance in the first year, so $40,000, and then you would inflation adjust that $40,000 amount each year after that, regardless of how your portfolio performs. Now, the issue here is, what if you need more than that amount from your portfolio? Let's use a more concrete example here on the screen to illustrate that. Carrying our example from earlier in the video forward, say that a hypothetical couple needs $34,400 of acquired portfolio income from their assets in the first year of retirement. And they have the starting portfolio value of roughly $500,000 that we showed on the prior screen as well, which turns out to result in a 6.88% withdrawal need. Now, that couple needs to withdraw 6.88% of their starting balance in order to obtain the $34,000 of spending money that they need, emphasis on the word need, to live on. Now, the 4% rule would say, nope, you should only take $20K, which is 4% of $500,000. And this would lead to a gap of $14,400 of necessary spending money. Now, the question arises, what do you actually do about that in that scenario? Do you go back to work to make up that difference? Do you work longer to save more money so that you have a larger starting portfolio value when you retire, from which a 4% withdrawal would satisfy your spending needs? Or do you cut spending by that $14,400 per year? Now, what if you can't cut spending by that amount? Now, ultimately, the question here is, do you need to live on only a 4% withdrawal? Or is a 6.88% withdrawal that this couple requires in the first year too high to be sustainable? It may be so, but the point of this illustration is to show that if we blindly follow the 4% rule or expect that in the future we will follow the 4% rule without doing any planning or prep to see if that would even be possible, we will be in for a world of problems. Now, to make this more concrete, this calculation here, required portfolio size, tells us what size pool of assets this couple would need in order to satisfy the $34,400 of spending, taking only 4% from the portfolio in the first year. And as you can see, if they were already starting with $250,000 in savings and they have 5 years to save to get to $500,000, they would need to save $30,000 a year. Well, imagine how much extra saving they have to do to get from $250K to $860,000. That might be 10, 12, 15 years of savings, and we don't know that just right now from looking at the screen. There's probably no amount of investment risk that this hypothetical couple could take on to subsidize the time or decrease the amount of time that would have to be allocated towards savings, right? And that illustrates the problem here. And let's move on now to the second internet rule of thumb, that you should have 100 minus your age in stocks when retired. So according to this rule, if you were age 60, the recommendation would be to have a 40% allocation to stocks and a 60% allocation to bonds. And you can see that on the screen here. You take 100 minus your age, which is 60, and you end up with a formula that spits out 40% stocks and 60% bonds. And each year as you age, you would decrease your allocation from stocks and increase the allocation into bonds. And this is a concept called a glide path, which you can now see here on the screen. As you get closer to and into retirement, you would progressively reduce the risky side of your portfolio and increase the safe side of your portfolio. Now, this can be extremely dangerous to execute, and if followed blindly, can blow up your retirement plan. See, arriving at retirement age with the right size pool of assets to fund your spending needs is a product of many factors, but there are 2 primary ones. The first is your savings rate, and the second is your investment rate of return over time. Now, great savers can target a much lower rate of return. Poor savers need to make up for that savings gap by either taking on more investment risk or committing to spending less in retirement. Let's take a look at this spreadsheet, this next spreadsheet here on the screen together. This is a savings calculator. Say you're age 60, as you can see here on the left, and say your desired retirement age is 65. You then run an RPI calculator like the one I showed on the prior section of this video, and you determine that you need a starting pool of assets of $536K right here, as you can see on the asset goal, in order to fund your 30-year retirement. With 5 years to save and a starting savings at age 60 of $250,000 and an asset allocation that targets a 5% rate of return, you would need to save $3167 per month or $38,000 per year in order to achieve that roughly $500,000 retirement savings target. What if you can't save that much? Well, then you need to seek a higher rate of return, which means a riskier portfolio, which means a more aggressive asset allocation. And let's say up to now you've followed a glide path and have slowly reduced stock exposure as you age and increase bonds, and you end up in this exact position where you haven't met your savings target, but your asset allocation is more conservative because you're age 60, such that you're only achieving a target rate of 5% growth. Well, let's say now we change the savings calculator here and put in a 7% target rate of return. Now, instead of needing to save $3167 per month, you only need to save $2540 per month, which ends up being $8,000 less that you need to save as a result of going out further on the risk spectrum. Now, admittedly, this is a fragile concept because you really can't control your rate of return directly, and you also wouldn't really have a clear picture in this scenario that I've just described of how much additional risk you would be taking on in order to increase your target rate of return from 5% to 7% in order to compensate for not having enough savings capability. But it's illustrative of the two levers available to you to hit your retirement savings goal. And using a glide path or a declining equity and rising bond allocation over time may or may not be appropriate for this. It is completely unique person to person based on your savings behaviors and savings expectations. I have many opinions about asset allocations as a guiding tool when it comes to retirement planning. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to hit all of them in this particular video, but I recently put out a video podcast called Asset Allocations Are a Scam. So if you're interested to learn more about asset allocation, I can include a link at the end of today's video to that asset allocation video. Now, on to the third terrible retirement rule of thumb is that you should have 25 times your planned annual spending in savings by the time you retire. According to this rule of thumb, if you wanted to spend $40,000 per year in retirement, you would need a $1 million value retirement portfolio. Now, there are a number of flaws with this recommendation, but the first and primary among them is that using annual spending as the baseline for this calculation is very misleading and will likely result in anyone following this recommendation working far longer or delaying retirement far later than they might otherwise need to. What really matters in determining the appropriate amount of retirement savings is not how much you will spend in retirement, but rather how much of that spending your retirement savings will be responsible for. Let me illustrate this. We're going to pull this up on the screen here. This spreadsheet here is a calculator that can help you determine how much of your annual spending needs will need to be met by your retirement portfolio. So in this example, say you wanted to spend $63,750 in year one of retirement. Well, the first thing to understand is that in most cases, to spend $63,000 after taxes, you will need to produce a pre-tax income that is larger. Let's assume that pre-tax income of $75K will produce that after-tax spendable amount of $63,750. Now the question is your retirement portfolio responsible for producing all of that $75,000 in the red bucket here? For most people, the answer will be no. Or at least it will be something like, maybe for the first few years or a period of time, yes, but once I claim Social Security for most of my retirement portfolio will only be responsible for a portion of that $75K. Say we assume that this scenario on the screen is a couple, and both parties will have Social Security income at the point at which they retire, and you can see that here. Their combined Social Security income will be $40,600, resulting in the fact that their retirement portfolio will need to support less than half of their replacement income. And this spreadsheet here will calculate that for us and tell us that this hypothetical couple would need $34,400 of required portfolio income. Now let's apply this internet rule of thumb here to compare the results. So if you had followed the original instructions, have 25 times your annual spending in retirement savings, you would do $75,000 times 25, which results in a pool of $1,875,000 in order to retire responsibly. However, when you calculate what 25 times your required portfolio income is, you would need a pool of $860,000, or the green section over here, in order to retire responsibly. Now, you shouldn't base your retirement decision on any one rule of thumb, and so even though I've said that using 25 times the required portfolio income would be more accurate in many ways, that is still not sufficient data to retire responsibly. For example, going back to this first bad rule of thumb, where did that 25x number come from? Pretty arbitrary to me. Do you still use 25 times your required portfolio income or even your annual spending if your investments are, say, in a 90% stock, 10% bond portfolio? What about if your investments are in a 10% stock, 90% bond portfolio? Do you still use that 25 times annual spending formula? What about if you are retiring at age 70? What if you're planning to retire at age 55? As you can see, there are a bunch of flaws with this bad internet rule of thumb. Now let's move to the fourth and final terrible retirement rule of thumb, which is that Roth conversions are universally applicable because Roth money is simply superior money. While Roth conversions certainly can be a great move in many scenarios, why they cannot be universally done as a rule of thumb is the following. First, many people will not benefit from Roth conversions while alive. They may not even live past the break-even point of the cost of the Roth conversion. Second, it's not always clear initially what the cost of Roth conversions will do to the tolerable withdrawal rate of your portfolio. Now let me show you an example that I'm going to pull from a video I did a couple weeks ago. A couple came to me and wanted to retire in 5 years. They had about $700,000 in retirement savings at the time and wanted to know when and whether Roth conversions would be appropriate to do. After reviewing their financial position, we showed them the summary table that I'm going to pull up here on the screen now. Now, based on a very popular financial planning tool's optimal Roth conversion scenario, and by the way, the tool did recommend doing Roth conversions, it looked like the break-even age for the conversions was 84 years old for the husband and 79 years old for the wife. In the USA, the median life expectancy for men is roughly 75. So that means that half of all men in the US will die by or before age 75. The median life expectancy for women in the US is roughly 80. This means that half of all women in the US will pass away before age 80. Now, we can't predict the future, but this places the husband at a significantly lower than 50% chance that he will ever benefit financially from the Roth conversions he will have paid for during his lifetime. His wife, on the other hand, would have slightly better than 50% odds that she would benefit financially from the Roth conversions in her lifetime. Next, we showed them the second summary table, the one below. And this table compares what their withdrawal rate would be with and without Roth conversions during the years that the tool recommended doing them. You can see here that without Roth conversions, their distribution rates would range from 3%, this column that says without Roth, to as high as 6.5%. Once they add in the cost of the Roth conversions, their distribution rates skyrocket and range between 8.5% to a maximum of 16.5% over that same time period. And this tells us that they would be putting a tremendous amount of strain and adding significant risk during that period of time. When combining both factors, the fact that the husband most likely will not have financial benefit from the cost of the Roth conversions, and the fact that their distribution rates end up sky high as a result of the cost of doing them, it led us to give a recommendation not to do Roth conversion, despite the fact that the financial planning tools that we use almost universally would have recommended doing so in this scenario. And as with other rules of thumb I have covered in this video, the takeaway here is the same. Roth conversions should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, not done on blind faith. So to wind this video down here, the takeaway from today's video is that every retiree is unique, which means that every retirement plan should be unique. There's no such thing as a universal rule of thumb in this arena. And as a result, and I truly feel like a broken record saying this in all my videos, but I cannot recommend more highly that you begin retirement planning 3 to 5 years before your target retirement age. That will give you sufficient runway to learn the things you need to learn, to run scenarios and models like what we've shown on the screen in this video, so that you can craft a plan that is unique to you and will confidently address your needs. So if you'd like to learn more about how we help our clients retire with confidence, you can visit our website at www.thepeakfp.com. As always, thank you for your time and attention, and I'll see you in the next video. And if you'd like to watch that asset allocation podcast that I referenced earlier in the video, you can click the link here.